"Get out of here before you embarrass us further, you pathetic old man," my son-in-law hissed, shoving a wad of crumpled $20 bills into the pocket of my worn-out fishing vest. He didn't even look me in the eye as he signaled the restaurant security to move me away from the entrance. My own daughter stood behind him, staring at her designer shoes, too afraid to speak up while her husband treated her father like a piece of trash that needed to be swept off the sidewalk. They were waiting for the city elite to arrive, and apparently my presence was a stain on their carefully polished reputation. I stood there, feeling the cold rain start to soak through my old cap, watching the man I had helped put into business treat me like a common beggar. He didn't know that the very ground he was standing on, the very restaurant they were about to enter, and the very air he breathed in this high society circle was only possible because of my silence. He saw a gardener, a fisherman, a relic of the past who had outlived his usefulness. He had no idea he was poking a sleeping lion with a very short stick. Before we get deeper into how I handled this disrespect, make sure to join our community by hitting that subscribe button. We share stories like this every day that you won't want to miss. The security guard, a young man who looked like he actually felt sorry for me, placed a firm but gentle hand on my shoulder. "Sir, you need to move along," he whispered, loud enough for the gathering crowd of socialites to hear. My son-in-law, Bradley, let out a sharp, mocking laugh. "Take the money, old man. Go find a cheap diner where your smell won't ruin anyone's appetite." He turned his back on me, laughing with his wealthy friends about the crazy homeless guy who tried to claim he knew them. I looked at my daughter one last time, hoping for a spark of the girl I raised, but she just followed him inside the golden doors. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. I just felt the weight of the black titanium card in my back pocket. A card that could buy that entire block before the sun went down. The game had officially begun, and Bradley was about to learn that some gates are meant to stay closed for people like him. I walked back to my beat-up truck, the engine turning over with a familiar growl. As I pulled away, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked exactly like what they thought I was. A tired, 65-year-old man who spent too much time in the dirt. But beneath that dirt was a foundation of steel they couldn't even imagine. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in 3 years. It was time to remind the world who actually held the keys to this city. Bradley wanted a show, and I was going to give him a front-row seat to his own destruction. I drove back to my small cottage on the edge of the lake, the silence of the cabin a sharp contrast to the ringing insults still echoing in my ears. For the last few years, I had intentionally faded into the background. I traded tailored Italian suits for flannel shirts and boardrooms for a vegetable garden. I wanted to see if anyone would love the man without the money. My late wife always said that gold attracts many friends, but only the dirt shows you who is loyal. She was right. Watching my daughter Sarah marry Bradley had been hard, but I stayed quiet, wanting her to be happy. I even gave Bradley a small investment to start his firm, pretending it was just my modest life savings. He took that money and immediately bought a luxury car instead of hiring staff. He started acting like he was born into royalty, and slowly he convinced Sarah that I was an embarrassment. Sitting on my porch, I looked at my hands. They were calloused and stained with soil, but they were the same hands that signed the merger for the largest investment group in the state 20 years ago. I am the silent majority shareholder of North Star Holdings. To the world, I am a ghost. To the board of directors, I am the man who can end a career with a single nod. The disrespect at the restaurant wasn't just a bruise to my ego, it was a revelation. Bradley wasn't just arrogant, he was cruel. He was the kind of man who would step on a person in need just to keep his shoes clean. I realized then that by playing the role of the poor old father, I was letting my daughter be raised by a wolf in a suit. I opened my old laptop, The screen glowed in the dark room, illuminating the rows of bank accounts and corporate structures that I hadn't touched in years. I looked at the portfolio of Bradley's firm. It was a mess of high-interest debt and shaky promises. He was desperate for a bailout, and he was hunting for a whale to save him. He didn't realize the whale was the man he just tried to bribe with $20 to go away. I sent a simple, encrypted message to my old legal counsel. It was time to pull the strings. I wanted to see exactly how far Bradley would go to protect his fake life before I took the floor out from under him. 2 days after the incident at the restaurant, Sarah called me. Her voice sounded strained, but there was no apology for what had happened. She told me that Bradley's parents, the Millers, were hosting a formal Sunday brunch at their estate. She said it would be a good chance for me to make amends for my embarrassing appearance the other night. The irony was thick enough to choke on. They wanted me to show up, but only if I promised to stay in the background. When I arrived at their massive, gaudy mansion, Bradley met me at the side gate. He looked me up and down, sneering at my clean but modest khaki trousers and simple polo shirt. He didn't even let me walk through the front door. "Follow me," he said, leading me through the servant entrance toward the kitchen. "My parents have some very important guests coming today. Investors. People who actually matter. You can sit here and have some coffee. The staff will bring you a plate once the real guests are finished eating." I sat at a small wooden table in the corner of the busy kitchen. The chefs and servers moved around me like I was a ghost. I could hear the laughter and the clinking of champagne glasses coming from the sunlit dining room just a few feet away. Bradley's father was loudly bragging about their upcoming expansion and how they were about to secure a massive partnership with a top-tier investment firm. They were acting like they already had the money in their pockets, mocking the little people who didn't understand high finance. Every time a waiter came back from the dining room, I heard more snippets of their conversation. They weren't just snobs, they were predators. They were talking about how they planned to cut the pensions of their current employees to inflate their profits before the merger. My blood began to boil. These people were built on a foundation of lies and the suffering of others. They looked down on me because they thought I was poor, but the truth was, they were the ones who were morally bankrupt. I finished my coffee, stood up, and walked out the back door before they could offer me their leftovers. I didn't need their food. I already had everything I needed to make sure this brunch was the last victory they would ever celebrate. As I walked through the garden toward my truck, I passed the open French doors of Bradley's study. I paused for a second, blending into the shadows of the tall hedges. Bradley was inside with his father, and they were arguing. Their voices were sharp with panic, a side of them the public never saw. "We need that North Star credit line by Friday, or the bank is going to seize the warehouse," his father hissed. Bradley slammed a fist onto his mahogany desk, sounding desperate. "I told you I am working on it. The fund manager said they are sending a representative to review our ethics and assets. We just need to keep up appearances for 1 more week." Hearing the name of my own company made my skin crawl. They weren't just looking for a loan. They were trying to trick my firm into saving their sinking ship. They had lied about their assets and hidden their mounting debts. It was a classic case of corporate fraud wrapped in a silk bow. They were so busy trying to look like billionaires that they had forgotten to actually run a business. I realized then that they didn't just want to be rich, they wanted the power to look down on everyone else. I reached my truck and sat in the driver's seat for a long time, staring at the mansion in the rearview mirror. I thought about the employees they were planning to rob of their pensions. I thought about the way Bradley looked at my daughter, like she was just another trophy to show off to his fake friends. My role as the quiet, gardening grandfather was over. I wasn't just a retired old man anymore. I was the chairman, and it was time to start the audit from hell. I pulled out my phone and sent a one-word text to my head of security. Proceed. Within minutes, I received a full report on the Miller family's secret accounts. They were deeper in the hole than I thought. They were betting everything on this one deal. They thought they were playing a game of chess against a weak old man, but they didn't realize I was the one who owned the board, the pieces, and the room we were playing in. The trap was set, and all I had to do now was wait for them to walk right into it. The next morning, I arrived at the headquarters of North Star Holdings. I didn't enter through the grand marble lobby where the cameras were. Instead, I used the service elevator in the garage, the one reserved for maintenance and high-level security. When I reached the top floor, my executive assistant, Marcus, was already waiting with a steaming cup of black coffee and a thick file. He didn't care about my muddy boots or my faded jacket. He knew exactly who I was and what I was capable of. He told me that Bradley had been calling their office every hour, begging for an emergency meeting with the secret owner. Bradley had even sent a massive gift basket and a bottle of vintage scotch to the office, trying to grease the wheels before the audit began. It was pathetic. He thought he could buy his way into a fortune with a few $1,000s worth of bribes. I opened the file and saw the names of the people Bradley had stepped on to get where he was. It was a long list of small suppliers who were never paid, and former partners who were cheated out of their shares. I instructed Marcus to schedule a meeting for Friday, but not at the office. I wanted it at the most exclusive golf club in the county, a place where the membership fee alone could buy a house. Bradley wasn't a member there, but he desperately wanted to be. I knew he would do anything to get through those gates. I told Marcus to send the invitation under the name of the general partner, leaving my identity a mystery. While the world saw me as a harmless retiree, I spent the afternoon dismantling the Millers' safety net. I contacted the banks holding their secondary mortgages and quietly bought up their debt. By the time the sun went down, I didn't just control their potential future through the investment fund. I owned their present. I owned their cars, their mansion, and the very chairs they sat on. They were living in a house of cards, and I was the wind that was about to blow it all down. I headed back to my cottage, feeling a strange mix of sadness and resolve. I wasn't doing this for revenge alone. I was doing it to show my daughter the truth before she lost herself in their world of shadows. The day of the meeting at the elite golf club arrived. I decided to show up early, dressed in my usual gardening clothes, a stained vest, worn-out work pants, and boots that had seen better days. I sat on a bench near the main entrance, watching the expensive cars roll in. The security guards here knew me, but they knew me as Arthur, the man who had funded the club's construction years ago. They nodded respectfully and let me sit where I pleased. Bradley pulled up in his shiny black sedan, looking like he had stepped out of a magazine. He hopped out, adjusted his silk tie, and practically skipped toward the entrance. Then he saw me. His face turned a deep shade of purple, and he marched over, his heels clicking loudly on the pavement. "What are you doing here?" he hissed, looking around frantically to see if anyone was watching. "This is a private club, Arthur. You can't just sit here like a lawn ornament. You are going to ruin my reputation before I even walk through the door." I looked up at him, my expression blank. "I am just enjoying the sun, Bradley. It's a public walkway." He grabbed my arm, trying to pull me toward the parking lot. "It is not public for people like you. I have the biggest meeting of my life in 10 minutes. If the representative from North Star sees me talking to a gardener who looks like he lives in a shed, the deal is dead. Get out. Now." He actually reached into his wallet and threw a $50 bill at my feet. "Buy yourself some dignity and disappear." I didn't move. I just watched the bill flutter in the grass. At that moment, his father and a group of other investors walked up. They all looked at me with disgust, whispering about how the club was letting the neighborhood go to seed. Bradley was sweating, his eyes darting back and forth. He was so terrified of being associated with me that he didn't notice the head of club security standing right behind him, waiting for my signal. I simply smiled, a cold, slow smile that should have warned him. But Bradley was too arrogant to be afraid. He was standing on the edge of a cliff, and he was the one doing all the pushing. Bradley reached out to grab my collar, his face twisted in a mask of pure elitist rage. He was shaking, desperate to remove the sight of me before his big break arrived.
"Look at you," he spat, loud enough for the nearby wealthy members to turn their heads. "You are a parasite. You have spent your whole life playing in the dirt while men like me build the world. You are nothing but a ghost of a failure." His father joined in, laughing as he adjusted his gold watch. "Don't waste your breath, Bradley. Some people are born to serve, and others are born to lead. This man is clearly the former. I let them continue. I let them empty their lungs of every insult they had stored up. I wanted the audience of onlookers to see exactly who these men were when they thought no one of importance was watching. A few of the club members, people who actually knew my history, looked on with wide eyes and dropped jaws. They started to move forward to intervene, but I gave a slight, almost invisible shake of my head. Not yet. I wanted Bradley to reach the very peak of his arrogance. Finally, Bradley signaled the security guard. "Throw this man out," he commanded, pointing a trembling finger at me. "He is trespassing and harassing the guests. If you don't remove him, I will make sure the management hears about your incompetence." The guard looked at me, then back at Bradley, and then back at me. He didn't move an inch toward me. Instead, he stepped closer to Bradley. I stood up slowly, brushing the dust off my vest. The $50 bill was still lying there in the grass. I stepped on it, grinding it into the dirt. "Bradley," I said softly, my voice cutting through his shouting like a knife. "You should be careful about who you call a failure. The world is much smaller than you think, and the people you step on while climbing up are the same ones who will be holding the safety net when you fall." He laughed in my face, completely oblivious to the fact that my assistant, Marcus, was standing at the top of the stairs with a clipboard, watching the entire scene. The clock was ticking, and Bradley had just sealed his fate in front of the very man who was supposed to save him. Marcus stepped down the stairs, his face a mask of cold professionalism. Bradley immediately wiped the sweat from his forehead and put on a fake, wide smile. He rushed toward Marcus, extending his hand. "Mr. Marcus, so good to see you. I am Bradley Miller. I am so sorry for the disturbance. This trespasser was just leaving." He tried to point back at me, but Marcus ignored his outstretched hand completely. Marcus walked straight to my side and stood there, waiting for my word. The silence that followed was deafening. Bradley looked back and forth between us, his mouth hanging open like a fish out of water. His father, who had been so loud a moment ago, suddenly turned pale. Marcus finally spoke, his voice echoing across the courtyard. "The meeting has been moved to the boardroom inside. The chairman is ready to review your application." Bradley let out a nervous laugh, trying to regain his footing. Of course. Let's get away from this person and get down to business. We have all the documents ready to prove our worth." Marcus didn't move. He simply gestured toward the grand entrance of the club. "Go inside and wait. We will be there shortly." Bradley and his father scrambled away, practically tripping over each other to get inside. They were so blinded by the prospect of the money that they still hadn't connected the dots. They thought Marcus was just being polite to an old man before kicking me out. They truly believed they were seconds away from a multi-million-dollar rescue. I looked at Marcus and nodded. It was time. We walked through the front doors, not through the service entrance this time, but through the main foyer. Every member of the club stood aside, some nodding in respect,
others watching with morbid curiosity. I could see my reflection in the polished glass of the boardroom doors. I still wore the old vest and the muddy boots, but my posture had changed. The gardener was gone, and the chairman had returned. Inside that room, Bradley was sitting at a long mahogany table, straightening his tie and rehearsing his lies. He had no idea that the man he had just tried to buy off with $50 was about to become his judge, jury,
and executioner. The heavy oak doors of the boardroom swung open with a slow, deliberate creak. Bradley and his father jumped to their feet, their faces beaming with fake corporate charisma. "We are so honored to finally meet the man behind North Star," Bradley began, his voice dripping with desperation and grease. He was looking at the door, expecting a man in a $5,000 suit. Instead, I walked in. I pulled out the chair at the head of the table and sat down, my muddy boots resting on the expensive Persian rug. The silence in the room was so thick it felt like it was choking them. Bradley's jaw dropped so low I thought it might hit the table. His father's face went from pale to a ghostly white, his hands shaking as he clutched a leather folder. This is a joke, right?" Bradley stammered, looking at Marcus for help. Marcus simply stood behind me, hands folded. "You are in the presence of the chairman of North Star Holdings," Marcus said firmly. "I suggest you show some respect." Bradley collapsed back into his chair, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for an exit. I leaned forward, the light from the chandelier catching the gray in my beard. "You asked for a credit line to save your company, Bradley. You told my team your business was built on integrity. But an hour ago, you told me I was a parasite. You told me I had no dignity. You threw $50 at me like I was trash." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the crumpled bills he had shoved at me days before at the restaurant, along with the 50 from the club. I tossed them onto the table. They slid across the polished wood and stopped right in front of his shaking hands. "I have reviewed your files," I said, my voice cold and steady. "I saw how you planned to rob your workers of their pensions to cover your own gambling debts and luxury cars. I saw how you treated my daughter as a trophy while you drained the life out of everything she cared about. You didn't want a partner, Bradley. You wanted a victim. But you picked the wrong old man to step on." I picked up the contract for their multi-million-dollar loan, the paper they thought would save their lives. Slowly, deliberately, I ripped it down the middle. Then I ripped it again. Their empire was gone. Bradley's father let out a quiet moan of despair, realizing that by the time they reached the parking lot, they would be bankrupt. The gate was closed, and I was the one who locked it. After the silence in the boardroom became unbearable, Bradley tried to speak, but only a pathetic whimper came out. I didn't wait for his excuses. I stood up and walked out of the room, leaving them sitting in the wreckage of their own greed. Within a week, the news of their financial collapse hit the papers. Because I had bought their debt, I made sure the mansion and the luxury cars were seized immediately. But I didn't keep the money. I redirected every cent into a trust fund for the employees whose pensions they had tried to steal. It was the only way to balance the scales. My daughter, Sarah, came to see me at my cottage a few days later. She cried for hours, not because she was poor, but because she finally realized the kind of man she had married. I didn't say "I told you so." I just held her and told her it was time to start over. She moved back into the guest house and started working at a local charity, finally learning what it means to earn a living with pride. Seeing her find her own strength was a greater victory than any business deal I had ever closed. As for me, I went back to my garden. I still wear my old fishing vest and my muddy boots, but I don't hide anymore. I realized that true power isn't about the name on a building or the balance in a bank account. It is about the ability to walk through the world
with a clean conscience and the strength to stand up for those who can't stand up for themselves. I am developing a new community project now, building affordable housing for retirees who were cheated by people like the Millers. My life is fuller now than it ever was when I was just a ghost in a boardroom. I am no longer just the gatekeeper of a fortune. I am the builder of a better future.
Looking back at everything, I wonder about the choices I made. I could have helped them, but it would have only fueled their cruelty. Do you think I did the right thing by letting them fall so hard? What would you have done if you were in my shoes? If you enjoyed this story of justice and growth, make sure to hit the like button and leave a comment with your thoughts below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss our daily stories of revenge and redemption. Your support helps us bring more of these incredible tales to life. The end. Thank you for listening.